All right, this is lesson 2.2, which is graphing. We can look at our original equation and just tell right off the bat that because of that x squared, that it will be a parabola. The other thing that we can tell just by looking at our equation, the -2 in particular, is that this will have a maximum value because that's negative. If it had a minimum value, it would be a +2. So the first step to graphing this equation would be finding our vertex. So the way we find our x and our vertex is our -b/m. If you look at the red equation, you can see basically all of those laid out. This equation doesn't actually have an m, so we can assume that it's 1. So in this equation, it would be -3, which is of course just +3, over 1. So our x is 3. Our y is a lot easier to find. If you just look at the original equation, it'll be 8. So our vertex is 3, 8. We can go ahead and graph that as we go along. The next step is the y-intercept. The thing that makes this the easiest to figure out is just knowing that x will equal 0 in your y-intercept. So we can just take our original equation and plug x in for that. So y would equal -2 times -3 squared plus 8. Of course, a negative times itself is going to be a positive because the negatives cancel out, so that's -2 times 9 plus 8, which turns out to be -18 plus 8, which is -10. We can go ahead and graph that also. And the last things we have to find in graph before we're done are the x-intercepts. Just like in the y-intercept, when the x was 0, in the x-intercept, the y will be 0. So we can just take our original equation and set it equal to 0. So we have -2 times x minus 3 squared plus 8. We can subtract the 8 over to the other side. Then we can divide by our -2, which gives us 4 equals x minus 3 squared. The thing that makes this easy to solve is just remembering that 2 times 2 is 4, and also -2 times -2 is 4. So we can square root both sides. We get 2 equals x minus 3, and -2 equals x minus 3. When we add the 3's over to each side, we get x equals 5 and x equals 1. We can go ahead and graph these, but we're not quite done yet. Before we can be finished, we have to find our axis of symmetry, our domain, and our range. An easy way to find the axis of symmetry is to look at your vertex. It's always going to be the x in your vertex. If you forget that, you can just look at your graph and figure out where, if you cut it in half along the x-axis, where it would be completely symmetrical on both sides. The domain on a parabola is always going to be all real numbers. And the range, we can just look at our graph and tell that y will always be less than or equal to 8. And that's it.